All right, guys, back here with another update on world news and politics, what's going on in the world. Um, so, Obviously, probably most of you have heard a couple days ago, Israel went ahead and did what it has been wanting to do for many years, if not decades. And they launched a massive military operation on Iran. It started on Friday the 13th. Uh, some people might think that's a coincidence. Other people who are, conspiracy driven and whatnot, Friday the 13th is supposed to be like a spooky day or whatever. So it happened to be on a Friday the 13th. The targets were mainly nuclear scientists, military personnel, leaders and generals, among others. The attack is obviously illegal and offensive. It's not even nominally or, you know, possibly preemptive, as Netanyahu has been suggesting. Netanyahu was claiming that they had intelligence that Iran was about to create a nuclear weapon and give it to one of their terror proxies, either the Houthis or like one of these other groups in the Middle East. They have a bunch of proxies in Iran, Syria, and Yemen. And he lied. Basically, Netanyahu's lying about that because Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. If they did, they wouldn't be attacking them like this. That's just logic. Logically speaking, they wouldn't be going this aggressively and attacking them if they did have indeed have a nuclear weapon and pose that sort of a threat. Additionally, the Ayatollah of Iran has, he's on record. He issued a fatwa saying, nuclear weapons are not permissible in Islam. They're not, okay or allowed. They're haram, basically. You can't create a nuclear weapon and call yourself a Muslim or a Islamic uh, government or state. So it's not permissible according to their own leaders. If anything, an attack like this will make them want to create a nuclear weapon as a deterrence against these sort of aggressive attacks from outsiders. So it's really back-ass words. I mean, this is the same thing that happened during the WMD scare craze during the Iraq War, right, leading up to the Iraq War, shortly after 9/11 happened. Um, Everyone was saying Saddam has WMDs and he's going to use them on whoever, and turned out to be a lie, or at least they didn't have evidence for it, even if they thought they did. Uh, yeah, initially the reaction of the United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio came out and said Israel acted alone and that we had nothing to do with this. The U.S. has nothing to do with this, not involved. He said it was unilateral from Israel's perspective. I don't know what prompted him to say this. Maybe it's the fact that many civilians died in the attacks, that he doesn't want to get involved this early on until, something goes one way or the other. Netanyahu came out shortly after and said that the U.S. was briefed about the plans to attack and that President Trump gave the go-ahead for the whole plan. Um, so, like, we can just ask here, like, who's lying? It's obvious who's lying, in my opinion. President Trump is lying. The United States is lying. Israel could not have and would not have acted alone in this situation. That much is clear because, as we now know, Israel's trying to drag the U.S. into the war because they feel like they can't reach their objectives by themselves. So they set out some objectives. We're not privy to them exactly, but they could reach all the way to regime change. Potentially that could be the ultimate aim of this operation, and they don't think they can achieve regime change by themselves, so they need U.S. help. Um, at the moment, U.S. is staying out of it directly. Maybe they're helping intercept some drones and missiles in Israeli airspace, but they're not putting boots on the ground or putting their own personnel in danger. So, what happened here? What did people get wrong? What did people get right? Many journalists in the U.S. and abroad fell for this idea. Even journalists who are purportedly anti-Trump and like they don't like his foreign policy or his policies in general. They don't like his outlook on things. they fell for this pump fake that Trump and Netanyahu were not getting along and were having a split between the two. And this was across the board, left, right, center. Everyone was saying that this was happening in real time, and it was an obvious lie, as we can see now. Maybe it wasn't obvious at the time because so many people got fooled by it, but it's clearly a lie now. Now that we know what we know, um, you know, there was reports that the United States was pulling out military personnel leading up to the attack, so to not put them in harm's way, get them out of the region. So they obviously knew what was about to happen. Uh, you know, it's not just a coincidence that they pulled out people from harm's way in their area. It's not coincidental that they knew, something was coming. Another pump fake was that there were talks going on between the U.S. and Iran on not allowing Iran to continue enriching uranium to, potentially weapons grade levels. Um, Allegedly these talks were to again stop them from getting nuclear weapons. Um, Questionable at best whether that was the actual aim. Talks were stalling because of disagreements on certain terms of the deals that they were trying to make, but they were set to resume on Sunday the 15th, and then Israel attacked 2 days before on June 13th, Friday, before talks were about to resume 2 days later. This is another diversion slash manipulation tactic. I think it was coordinated between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. um, Iran probably thought since they're talking to us, they're not going to attack us now, and they kind of let their guard down, and they got badly hit. Uh, you know, Kudos, I guess. If you're able to trick a state with this many years of experience and statecraft, so easily with just this kind of childish like diversion tactic, I guess. Congratulations. It's very impressive. President Trump said the hardliners from Iran who are making it hard to make a deal are now dead. So come and let's make a deal. Come back to the table. Let's renegotiate. Obviously, this is a joke. Um, I shouldn't need to say much more than this. They preemptively attacked. They offensive illegal attack from Israel's perspective, and they want them to come back to negotiate after they started a war with them and killed many civilians in their country, their sovereign airspace, and buildings collapse on people. There were kids who died in these attacks. So it's obviously a joke. I mean, they Trump calls himself the art of the deal, the master negotiator and whatnot. Let's see where this ends up. Who knows where it'll end up? We're still in the early stages. There's, many indications that say that this may take longer than, you know, initially expected, especially if some of the bigger powers don't get involved directly. United States, France, Russia on Iran's side, France, UK, US, etc. So, getting to the main point of the thing, did World War III just start right before our eyes? It's hard to say definitively. Even during World War One and Two, they didn't know initially that it had begun until they were well into it, and more nations joined sides and made alliances and pacts and got involved. Um, so you see it in retrospect, like, oh, okay, that's when it started. Historians kind of agree and make up a timeline of the events. So while you're living through it, it's kind of hard to say definitively. However, maybe it's an obvious point, but the more countries that get involved, the likelier it is to be something like a World War III. There were reports that the UK has moved some of its jets to the Middle East. Uh, because the world is, more interconnected than ever, economically speaking, everyone trades with everyone almost, with some exceptions. Um, Two countries with important trade ports near them, so the Suez Canal and the Strait of Hormuz, Iran basically controls it, and the Suez Canal is technically not controlled by Israel, but it's right next to Israel, and Egypt is very cooperative with them. So, chances are they're not very anti uh, anything that Israel wants to get shipped through that port. So, this is, I guess, the idea, like the Thomas Friedman idea of like if two countries both have a McDonald's in them, then they probably won't go to war. Obviously, we saw that how bullshit that was based on the fact that the Ukraine and Russia went to war, and now many countries are, it seems like a conflagration everywhere. Stuff is popping up. There was Iran, there was Pakistan and India several weeks ago that got under control, but you know, stuff is happening everywhere. People who say nothing ever happens, I think you're sorely mistaken. History is not over, in other words. Um, yeah, obviously, with these important ports being involved in the countries that are engaged in war, it can have catastrophic impacts economically for the whole world, almost. So a lot of trade and oil goes through these ports. They're interconnected with the global economy. Um, yeah, oil prices have risen, obviously. People are going to feel that. Even now, maybe they're feeling it, but they will feel that going forward if this drags on for a long while. Um, For example, China buys a lot of oil from Iran, evading sanctions and not listening to finding other ways to get Iranian oil for cheaper. Um, so who knows? The countries most likely to get involved seem to be the US, UK, and France, possibly on Israel's side, maybe Germany as well. Monetarily, because Germany doesn't have military, um, capabilities after World War II. But and less likely, but also possible, are countries like China, Russia, North Korea, and Pakistan on Iran's side. Um, you know, predictions are, folly for stuff like this. Obviously, there are people with much more intelligence, in higher ranks in the government of these two countries and the United States as well, that will know a lot more about these things. And they will not make that information public if they don't want it to be public. So I think predictions are kind of useless, but it's very dangerous. You know, there's those clocks that say, "Are we approaching midnight?" As in midnight being the end of humanity, the end of the world, catastrophe, cataclysm, whatever. And every once in a while it gets closer to midnight. They say it's 11:55 or 11:57 or 11:59. A war like this, I think, inches us closer to that. So that's not prediction, but I think it's danger. It's not a firm yes or no to the answer of is this World War III, but it's a alarm sign. It's a ringing the alarm bells, like this is dangerous. Um, and I want to end this video by saying, obviously Netanyahu's wanted by the ICC on an arrest warrant. He's a war criminal and a grave danger to stability and peace in the Middle East. In fact, he is probably currently the single greatest threat to peace and stability in the Middle East in all aspects. Um, he tries to, get involved everywhere. And like, if Israel topples Iran and installs like the Shah there again, um, this is the beginning of Israel dominating the Middle East, becoming like almost like a mini empire, even though it's a tiny little country with not that many people. Um, you know, it seems like everything they want to get done in the Middle East is getting done one way or another, by hook or by crook. Um, so that's I guess my prediction. It's kind of like a if how should I say it? Like a conditional. If this happens, then output is X. Um, if Israel is able to topple the Iranian regime and get rid of the Ayatollah and the Islamic Republic system in Iran, it might be the beginning of like a mini Israeli empire dynasty in the Middle East, um, which is, you know, good for them, good for Israel. I don't know how good it is for the countries neighboring them because, as we can see, even with their limited power and limited size, they cause a lot of trouble in the area. A lot of death happens, a lot of damage, a lot of uh, economic warfare and things that do not, you know, are not for the benefit of the greatest amount of people in the region. All right, so that's my video. I hope you guys like, comment, subscribe, share with your friends if you think it's interesting. Um, is this World War III? I guess the short answer is who knows. When you're in it, it's hard to say for sure, but this is a big danger, and any escalation is, catastrophic. I mean, civilians are going to die. Who knows how many? Economic hardship awaits for people in these two countries, probably a big economic contraction, potentially a recession or depression if it rages on for many weeks or months. So who knows? The United States trying to strong arm Iran to the negotiating table. Maybe they'll come if they feel like they're in a difficult position, a difficult enough position that it's worth renegotiating. But across the aisle in the United States, with like a few exceptions here and there, everyone's supporting the Israel's efforts. Lindsey Graham, John Fetterman, across the aisle, it's bipartisan. Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, all those people in leadership positions in both parties they don't care about whether civilians are in harm's way or dying as much as they do about, you know, America's economic and political interests, power dynamics, power play. It's the whole thing is a power play. Um, yeah, that's I guess the nugget of neorealism for you in international relations. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one, hopefully pretty soon. All right, bye.